When I saw the congressional hearings in 2005, the first round of congressional hearings, it seemed like a tragedy with a capital T. We were talking earlier about tragedy with capital T versus tragedy with lowercase t before the interview began. So it seemed like an American tragedy. You know, these larger than life figures who people, worship, having these enormous public falls from grace. So I was like, okay, there's maybe a play there. And they were guys who knew each other and were, betraying each other, and some were lying and some were telling the truth, and they had these personal relationships that went on for decades. So that struck me as like a potent area. But I didn't begin writing the play until it occurred to me to include a third character who doesn't use steroids, and then I sort of saw how the interplay among those three people would give me a structure. So the congressional hearings were the first moment, and then the idea sort of sat in my head for a long time. There's something about that kind of discipline, and there's something healthy about being an athlete, and it's achieving these great feats of strength or physical skill. So yes, I think that there's good reasons why those people are sort of seen as maybe good role models, but because professional sports is also a business, it's also a form of entertainment, so there's a lot of money involved. It's complicated, and they're also humans, and they can't live up to those expectations. It came from journalists, from sports writers, from baseball writers, who were really, really excited about the play and really responded to it, which was gratifying. It was funny to see some theater critics be like, well, I don't know if this play has anything interesting to say about baseball, and then like the ghostwriter of Juiced call me on the phone and say like, you got it exactly right. That was kind of hilarious, but yeah, those were the people who sort of came out of the woodwork and contacted me and wanted to talk about it. I think just because, it's what they cover for a living, and they were tracking the story the whole time. Some of them were guys who tried to break the story, early on when people weren't really paying attention. So for it to, I think, move at all into some other medium, I think they just found that gratifying. So that was cool. I should be an A's fan, but for whatever weird alchemy takes place that makes you attach yourself to one team over another, I was always a Giants fan, and so when the Giants and the A's made had some great teams in the late '80s. They made the playoffs. They went to the series. They played each other in the series, and because of the time frame, because that was in the 1980s, the players that were my sort of idols as a kid were literally the same guys who turned out to have been tainted by this scandal. So I think that's also partly why I was drawn to it. I think that on the surface, my plays seem to be about some pretty disparate topics, but I think that there's also some very similar themes. If we're talking about Bach at Leipzig, which is a play set in the 1700s about Lutheran German pipe organists, or Back, which is a play set, as recently as the final scenes take place, 3 or 4 years ago, and it's about baseball players. But on a deeper level, both of those plays are very much about professional competition and friendship and betrayal among sort of ambitious men. Early on, when I was first starting out, when I was in college, and I didn't have an enormous amount of awareness of what was actually literally going on in contemporary theater, just sort of the major playwrights who I was exposed to, Stoppard, and also Tony Kushner. When I saw Angels in America at ACT in San Francisco when I was in high school, it made an enormous impact on me, and that was actually when I first started to consider writing plays. Peter Schaffer, Amadeus and Equus were a big deal for me. I went through a big David Mamet phase in college where I was obsessed with Glengarry Glen Ross. Carol Churchill is, I think, just a genius. So people like that, but then once I moved to New York and started to have an awareness of the community that I was a part of, I find myself really there are people from the generation right ahead of me, people like Doug Wright, or Nilo Cruz, or who I met when I came to the city and was sort of following what they were doing. And then people, my peers now, people like Adam Bach, or so it's funny, you sort of draw inspiration from where you find it. I have absolutely no idea. What's the number of stitches on a baseball? Is that what you just asked me?
Yes.
I don't know, 162.